Okay, let's look at the stock charts, looking for trade opportunities and stock setups. Drop me a thumbs up. I do appreciate that. It does help the channel. It takes just like a second to click the little thumb icon. It's supposed to help out with the algo. And if you're interested in the private member group, I'm posting additional trade ideas, additional market concepts, mostly what I do is I see trade setups and trade ideas or things that are actionable and triggering, and I'm capturing that stuff and posting that in that group. In a more timely manner. These videos take a second, they take a little while to record and then get out, and it's just not as timely. Link in the description below for that private member group. Triple Qs. All right, this is our tech sector. All right, so I'm just going to kind of go through the high-level stuff of what I see going on. I got to go to the weekly chart to highlight that. So here's the weekly chart on the Triple Qs. And if I roll all the way back, you can see basically in October of 2022, we had an upward channel. Okay, broke channel earlier this year. There's the breakdown. This is a weekly chart, so it, plays out over years basically. Broke channel. Then we put in this big bearish rising wedge while diverging lower on the momentum. You can see we've basically had lower and lower momentum on the RSI and the PPO throughout this time frame. So we are diverging. And then when I look at the kind of the more near-term stuff, kind of the last month or so, you can see we have a topping stick. That's a bearish engulfing candle on the weekly chart right there. All right. So if you go back and look, that's at a long extended uptrend and right at that resistance level from that previous channel. There's your channel. That was the support level, and there's resistance. So it's a rejection at resistance, and it's a topping stick as well. So the way you trade it is just, weekly close above that would negate that as a topping stick. Otherwise, it's in play for the top of the market. We're above it now, basically, but we are, the week, we still have, the week's, it's Tuesday, midday Tuesday. So plenty of time in the weekly candle. I would look for some sort of sell-off this week to bring the market back down and keep it within this kind of 608.70 area on the weekly candle, and then closing the week basically either at that level or below. All right, that's what I'd be looking for. So that's that. Let me go back to the daily chart. Here's the daily on the Triple Qs. Again, we also have a bearish engulfing on the daily chart. So again, you can treat that as a top, and a daily close above would negate that as a top. And we don't have that daily close above really. They might just inch it just over that candle. You can see today we're just over there. So maybe we close and just barely inch it above that candle. If it's just barely above it, then it does technically negate it as a topping stick on the daily chart, not on the weekly chart. And yeah, we could see that. Maybe they'll want to run some stops, intra-week, basically. And I could even see a back test of this trend line up here. But maybe they'll want to run some stops and then have that sell off some point this week. Wednesday, I think there's some reports coming out. And then still close that weekly candle as still confirm that weekly bearish engulfing candle as a topping stick. So as of right now, we're kind of at resistance on the daily. It's an objective short here, pretty much here. And could obviously go up and do the little back test there a little bit higher. But it's a pretty good risk reward because on the weekly candle, you take the short here, right? Let's say you take it, and then the weekly candle, the weekly bearish engulfing still holds, then you're good. You just write it down. If you get you start closing above that candle, then you stop out. And so the risk reward is pretty favorable. Small amount of risk for a potential good reward. And I'd be looking for, we got to take out these lows right here. So I'd be looking for that for the next leg down to maybe 580, 583-ish for support. And yeah, look for that. And then probably lower. I've got key levels down below. I like this level actually. It's about 559. All right, so that's what I got on the triple Qs. And Nvidia, everybody's watching Nvidia, so there's some stuff going on. I'm noticing like they're moving, the money's kind of moving around Nvidia. Like yesterday it was Apple, and the money's kind of moving around. But Nvidia, I still think is going to be a key stock to watch for overall direction of the Mag 8s. And so Nvidia, we had that false breakout. It's still in play. So you got this trading range here. Okay, you broke out, negative divergence on the breakout, you failed, and you're back below. So I'm still looking for this to head down to the lower end of the range, which is about, it's like right here, about 165. So I'm looking for that. And if you get that, that's the triple Qs is going to roll over as well. So yeah, and we're just, just kind of back below the range, not going down, not going up, just sideways right now. And again, while we're moving sideways, that's when we're like today, Amazon, they're buying Amazon. Yesterday it was Apple. It's rotation from one Mag 8 to the next. But the thing is, as Amazon's going up, Google's going down. They're selling one and buying the other. So, and Broadcom's down. So that's consistent with kind of this sideways price action. If Nvidia is just going sideways, you can see some rotation from one to the other, but in general, we're not going anywhere. Someone asked me about Tesla. I'll just do a quick update. Again, sideways. There's really nothing going on. Now, it is in an upward channel. All right, so there's Tesla. It does have negative divergence showing up, but it is in an upward channel. And, you've got some support about 413-ish. Just kind of going nowhere. So I would give it a bias to the upside, kind of a drift higher. But with the divergence, I think the upside will be limited. You could pop up, hit that trend line, and that would probably be the end of the upside, and then they'd sell into it and it'd move back down. So for me, there's no trade here. It's just kind of wait and see, wait for a setup. Gold, all right, GDX hitting, gap down today and clear breakdown, very impulsive selling. We're at support now. It's about 72.22. There's some reactions, big candle right there. So there's some support here. So I'd say you're probably going to get a bounce, but it's sell the rip now because you had an uptrend. That trend's broken. So rallies into resistance are objective to short. I think that's the way you trade this now is sell the rip, and I do believe it's going to head lower. Although you might bounce in the short term because we're, again, at support right now. So that's that. And then if you look at like the metal, gold, yeah, there's GLD. That's kind of at support too. This one actually hasn't broken the uptrend. So I've got this uptrend here, and I think we're at support on that trend line. So it's, I think there's a good probability that you get a little bounce here. But the miners have clearly broken down. They often lead the metal, so maybe a bounce on GLD, which the miners would likely bounce, and then continue lower on GLD and also break trend, on the next move down. So that's what I have on those miners. They're all getting just smoked today. You can see they all trade the same, but look, big, they're all down like 10% or more, most of them at least. And they are, it's a very crowded trade, and this is the rush for the exits. Everybody's just bailing, trying to take the profit. Not everybody can sell. And then if you look at the dollar, dollar's kind of trending higher. There's the dollar futures. We are trending higher. Nothing huge today, but moving up. So I don't know. To me, it just looks like this is the first move down in gold. I think they're going to bounce here. And then you'll see more downside here in the future. The banks, we've had a couple days of a relief rally in the regional banks. Here's KRE, so rallying into resistance. 61.10 is resistance, and then we still haven't hit the major target of this bearish rising wedge, which I have marked right there at 56ish. So that's what I think is probably the next move, rallying into resistance and then down to the major target. And then, I don't know past that for now. That's the only trade that I have. Lulu. Okay, so Lulu, if you go to the weekly chart, I've liked this one as a long trade. I just was a little unsure of it with the market setup because the market did look like it was going to roll over. We haven't quite seen that roll over there in triple Qs, and obviously I've covered that. But we have bullish divergence on the weekly chart. All right, so that is clear. Maybe not quite there on the PPO. So I don't know if we're going to get a trend reversal. It does look like we're going to get a bounce. That's the weekly chart. Let me go to the daily. You can see we clearly have bullish divergence there on the daily. There's your last divergent low right there. And then we have this gap to fill right here. There's this gap. So I'm under the assumption that we're going to fill that gap. That for me is probably the extent of where I think this stock will go, because I don't see enough on the weekly chart to tell me that it's just going to be this long-term move higher. But I think we're probably going to fill the gap. However, I don't think we'll actually fill it. I think we'll get close because it's such an obvious gap. I think you run up, you get close, and then the sellers step in early. So I'm looking for a move close to the gap, and then I'd be looking to close out that trade. I did pick this one back up today. The market looks like it can hold up for a little bit, and that's all you really need is just a little while, and then this thing will probably run up and fill that gap. So back in that on the long side. Again, you also have this resistance right here about 179.40. Lots of reactions there. We're above it now, so we'll see how they close the day. This thing has a tendency, at least I've noticed, to kind of sell off into the second half of the day and close back below resistance levels. They give you a lot of looks. You can see they did it, a couple times through here, popped it above that resistance only to close back below. So that could be the status quo for today as well. We do have to wait for the close. And if you see that, then then it's not a breakout. Then we haven't broke above this resistance level into the gap. And but if you get a daily close in this gap, kind of where we're at now or even higher, then I think you have elevated probability, good probability, we're going to run up towards closing that gap. The gap's at 206. So far it looks pretty good. We'll see how we close the day. I'll wrap up with the Semiconductor ETF, SOXX. You can see here on the daily chart, we clearly have a break of trend. And we also now, you can see there's your trend line. We were just walking up that trend line. Big impulsive sell down, break of trend. And then since that time, they've just been kind of floating this thing higher, but right on the trend line. So at the end of the day, this is backtesting of that trend line. We have a break, and then this is backtesting. And you can see we're starting to kind of pop above that former high area, which gives us negative divergence. We didn't quite have that on the daily chart, and now we do. So what I'd be waiting for, if you want to, because I think there's a short setup here, but it's just continuing to backtest. I'd look for a rejection. If we get a rejection off this trend line, some sort of impulsive red day, bearish engulfing, or an outside day, or a doji, some sort of rejection candle, then likely that'll be a sell signal. So keep an eye out for that. This will correlate with Nvidia. If Nvidia heads down to the bottom of that range, like I pointed out on that chart, then that's likely when you'd see this rejection as well. So we will keep an eye on that one. And that's all I have for today. I'm going to keep looking. I'll get the video out and catch you guys on the next one.